Hello everyone, my name is Jed Schlackman. I'm a holistic counselor, a spiritual energy healer, and in this particular video I would like to talk about trauma and PTSD and go into some explanation or discussion of what people refer to as complex PTSD or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The phrase PTSD is very widely used both in a clinical context and in popular discussion. So many of you would have some idea of what it's referring to. The idea that after some traumatic experience, a person has lasting effects, lasting stress reactions that are triggered by something that kind of recapitulates or reignites that sense of being traumatized. Complex PTSD is really just a subcategorization of people that are having kind of a more intense version, a more deep version of PTSD that would be perceived as more challenging to treat, more difficult to heal or recover from, based upon the nature of how it developed to begin with. Complex PTSD isn't currently a specific psychiatric or medical diagnostic term. PTSD is. So if we look at how trauma develops and how post-traumatic stress patterns manifest, we can see that when a person has traumatic experiences, that experience is something the person's really not prepared to fully or completely process. So they have some means of reacting or protecting themselves in that situation. So if you're going through a situation that's really emotionally overwhelming, that's hard for you to really digest and process and integrate into your life journey in a sense, then you could get stuck in that particular reaction, not just in that moment or that time when it's happening, but that becomes a default reaction later on in life anytime there's some type of stressful stimulus that has similarity to the original trauma. We have to keep in mind that no experience or occurrence, in a sense, in and of itself is automatically traumatic. What's traumatic for one person might not be traumatic for another person, depending on their preparation, their level of psychological and spiritual development, their ability to process that particular experience in a way that's not overwhelming to them, in a way that they can adequately move through that experience and maintain kind of a stable, calm sense of self, of who they are. Therefore, trauma is something that's somewhat unique to each person. We don't want to make assumptions about how someone has processed their experience, about what emotions they have attached to or connected to the experience and memories, about what beliefs or meaning they may give or attach to that particular experience. It can vary from one person to another, even with an identical exposure or an identical type of situation that they were in. Understanding that is also useful when you're treating stress and trauma, because you can help people reflect on and understand how they reacted and responded to an experience what meaning they attach to it, what beliefs they might carry forward from that, what emotions are still kind of built up within them that haven't been fully released or resolved. That's all part of the healing process, bringing all that into conscious awareness so that you can reprocess those experiences and shift your relationship with that experience so that you're no longer traumatized by it, so you can reflect upon it and have some balance, some centeredness within yourself, not being overwhelmed, not being triggered into some automatic reaction that might not be rational under present circumstances. With complex PTSD, it's perceived that the person has more of a chronic or intense level of exposure to whatever the trauma was, and therefore it's kind of more deeply ingrained in who they are, in the development of their personality or identity. So it could be multiple traumas that that person experienced through the course of their life, or it could be one particular form of trauma that was very prolonged. So the person spent a long period of time adapting and reacting to that circumstance or situation, and so that reaction or adaptation has become deeply embedded in their psyche. It's kind of intertwined with the development of their personality, of who they are and how they relate to life. So with that level of intensity, of chronicity, of complexity essentially, you can see why it would be extra challenging or more difficult to work toward healing and recovery from that form of trauma. And that would be the main differentiation between complex PTSD and more of a standard, ordinary diagnosing of PTSD. The fundamentals of trauma and how it's impacting people are the same. It's just kind of a more severe, or more intense form of PTSD. So if we look into the healing process, really the same fundamental ideas would apply whether someone has the standard, ordinary post-traumatic stress disorder, or they've been given a clinical label, in a sense, of complex PTSD. With the complex version, you would just have to be extra mindful, extra cautious about how you're proceeding through therapy and treatment, since the person has this more in-depth structure of how they've reacted to trauma, how it's impacted their development, how it's affected the way they relate to life, to other people, and so on. There's also the potential that that person will have a harder time connecting to a resource within themselves that has some stability, some sense of safety or security. If you've spent your entire life in that trauma mode, never really at all feeling safe or secure or stable in your environment, then it would be hard to draw upon that resource to bring yourself into a state where you're able to reflect upon and reprocess something that was traumatic when you experienced it. Part of the protocol of working with trauma, of helping people kind of overcome it and transcend it, is building within them a connection to resources of strength, of safety, of stability, of inner peace and equilibrium, so that they can be present and able to observe and reprocess the traumatic memories and experiences. So that's really an important foundation of the therapeutic process. Once you bring the person into a connection with that source of stability, with feeling grounded and safe, then you could start to help them re-examine or reprocess things that previously were overwhelming or traumatic. If you just try to immediately direct them to relive or relook at those memories without having an anchor for them to connect with that helps them be stable and centered as they look back at those things, you can just aggravate the trauma. So it's this delicate balancing act of building up that sense of safety and security, those resources for being grounded, for feeling a spiritual connection. That's an important part of this healing process. So having those resources and then bringing the person to reconnect or re-examine those traumatic memories to whatever extent they're prepared or ready to do that without becoming overwhelmed, without re-triggering and so on. So you have to continually monitor where a person is at in that process. With complex PTSD, it may be more challenging. You may be working on helping them address multiple traumas or a very long time span of trauma. So you really need to be very thorough in helping them have that sense of safety and security somewhere that they can connect with, whether it's the space that you're doing healing work in or something they can connect with their visualization and imagination. It might be a safe place in their home where they feel calm. It might be somewhere in nature where they feel more secure. It could be some place they've seen on a TV show or in a movie. So there's different possibilities for what someone can bring into their consciousness that helps them be secure and more calm, able to be present, to feel safe enough to explore something that could have been distressing or upsetting previously. It's important to have trust and confidence in the process, to have a positive belief that you have the power and resources within you and with the support that's being given from other people to help you move forward on that healing journey. To trust that you can connect with a sense of security, that you can feel safe, that you can be centered and present enough to choose different reactions to situations in your life, to no longer be bound by your old patterns, no longer be stuck in those more automatic types of reactions. Some of the healing resources involve working with your body, helping your nervous system calm down, just being aware of your physical reactions and using different tools and modalities to help stabilize the physiology, to help bring your body into a more relaxed or calm state, which can then foster a more calm emotional state, a more settled mental state, and so on. So working on healing trauma does involve these multiple layers since the impact, the processing of trauma is occurring in these multiple layers. So it's happening in your mind, in your emotions, in your energy field, and your physiology. All of those are in some way reacting or adapting according to your experience, your interaction with your environment. And we have the power to modulate, in a sense, to repattern the way these things are playing out. Some people say you can rewire your brain, so neuroplasticity, that term means that our network of our nervous system can be repatterned based upon our thought process, our emotional process, our lifestyle. So if you think that you're stuck in a particular way of reacting, consider that you're actually able to reprogram and rewire things. So when you encounter a situation, the same stress response that you had in the past will not necessarily repeat. You're not necessarily going to continue with the same circuit firing, in a sense, for the rest of your life. You can switch the associations. So you can see a situation that in the past would have triggered a feeling of fear, and then the physiological reactions connected to fear, your heart starting to race, your mind starting to race, all that. Whereas it can shift to where you can perceive the same stimulus or scenario and just observe it calmly, realizing here and now you don't have to react the way you might have had to react in the past. You can feel more safe and calm in your present situation and realize that you don't have to immediately react. You don't have to respond the way you used to. You have the opportunity to use your conscious thought process to more rationally consider the current situation, to think through the different variables, to see where your actions could lead, and so on, and choose more mindfully what you're going to do here and now. This is a process that occurs over time, so you won't expect that everything is repatterned, reprogrammed all in one day. You can have major breakthroughs, major leaps, in a sense, in your progress as you go through different healing modalities. Especially if you can reflect on a really important core experience. So whatever is the deepest roots of the trauma pattern, if you can access that, if you can revisit those memories and reprocess them successfully, then it's shifting something on a deep subconscious level, and that will now be reflected in your everyday life, where your subconscious immediate responses will not be the same as they used to be, since the subconscious level itself has been transformed. Complex PTSD is a term that's become kind of more popular in recent years, and it does give some useful explanation or understanding of why some traumatic histories, in a sense, are more challenging to overcome or treat than others might be. But just because you've received that label, don't assume that you can't recover, that you can't heal, that you're not going to be able to move forward in your life. Have faith and persistence. Have trust in who you really are. So working on that spiritual connection, kind of reclaiming your wholeness, your true consciousness beyond the experiences you've had, your more fundamental identity that's not limited by human life experience. So to know yourself as a spiritual being with immense potential, and to also know that you are deeply valuable, appreciated, loved, that you are part of the wholeness or oneness, regardless of whatever fragmentation, whatever suffering has manifested in this human journey. If you have any questions, comments, feedback you want to share, you're welcome to reach out, send comments, contact me by email, etc. You can visit my website, phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. For now, I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.